I know people are going to be like, there's no way. I promise you these things are real. Most people don't walk around with a sign that says like, hey, I molest kids. It is your job to protect them. Taking it to the grave could be harmful. Sometimes you really love that person and that they were good to you in other aspects of your life. And that in and of itself can be extremely confusing. Healing is 100% possible.
Welcome to Silent No More. I'm your host, Yiti, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is about listening to the voices of survivors of child sex abuse, with the goal of raising awareness, educating our communities, and challenging the silence that allows abuse to thrive. Whether you're a parent, educator, advocate, ally, or simply someone who wants to better understand this issue, this space is for you. Before we begin, please know that this episode includes sensitive content, including discussions of trauma and abuse. This podcast is intended for adult audiences ages 18 and older. Please take care while listening. So welcome, Yachet, to this podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Same here. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Yaka. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I practice here in Dallas, Texas, and I'm also licensed in New York. So I also see clients virtually from New York. And I specialize in trauma and in sex therapy.
That's amazing. I'm so excited because I think there's a lot to talk about for child sex abuse survivors as are now adults, and you have a lot of experience in that. So I'm very excited. I want you to start with the abuse statistics. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So with males, there's much more of a stigma with child sexual abuse. There's almost that understanding of like, well, guys like it. And there's a lot more shame also in males reporting it. Like there have been several reports of students being groomed by their adult female teachers. And a lot of times they're just met with kind of like, oh, now you're so lucky, things like that, even though it's 100% sexual abuse. So a lot of times males don't report. As a result, males are also obviously abused by other males. And a lot of times they feel emasculated. There's just a lot more shame, a lot less understanding, I think, of their experience of just there's so many different factors. And also then in general, the underreporting for different communities because people are not believed, not supported, shamed, too many consequences. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Right. There's underreporting because of shame.
So I think the percentage, I wrote it down here, I think for girls, it's about 25 to 33% of female children. And for males, it's about 7 to 17% that we have reported. The numbers are probably far larger for both.
Scary. Those are staggering numbers.
Yeah. And what's staggering is it's more than that. Meaning that's what we know based on reports.
Yeah. And everyone knows it's underreported.
Yeah. It is terrifying.
That's crazy. I was researching this yesterday. And do you know the average age for coming forward for someone that's been sexually abused as a child?
So it's so funny because I think I just saw this, but maybe you posted it. Was it 53?
52.
Okay, but it could be you posted it because I just saw this somewhere.
Yeah, I posted it.
But it could be from you. Yes, I think I saw what you
That's
posted.
the average. That means you have to take into account that considers 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s. That's so messed up.
Oh my God, yeah. And some people never come forward.
Right. I think most people
you're saying
never
that's
do.
an average age for people that do come forward, right? And you have to, again, account for the people that don't ever come forward.
It's crazy. I have people in my inbox, since I started this work, they never came forward and they never will. There's just too many reasons why they wouldn't.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake. It's not simple.
It's crazy. There's so much at stake. You have to choose. Do you want to have a family? Or do you want to tell people what happened to you? These are the choices that survivors have to make.
For sure. In some communities and in some instances, yeah.
Right. I mean, I chose the family scenario because a lot of times people are abused by family.
Right.
siblings, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. And so that is a very real choice people have to make.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying because it's not just that sometimes, majority of the time it's by family
Right,
and by people that are trusted.
right.
So stirring the pot, people are also so uncomfortable by it that they're gonna side with the abuser because they'd rather pretend it's not true. I mean, there are so many things that are just put on the victim. So, yeah, and some people really do lose their family in certain communities. It goes even deeper than that, not just of the internal family drama, but sometimes community-wise, people ostracize them or they could lose their jobs, they could lose their positions within the community. I mean, some of these things are quite insidious and they go deep.
Yeah, shidduchim for their children, shidduchim for their siblings, schools, not being accepted into schools.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
This is a huge decision someone has to think about. And it's just the safer option sometimes is just not to say anything. And what would you say? Yeah, I'm curious what you would say as a therapist, coming forward versus not coming forward. Do you see merit in coming forward? Like, what's so bad about not coming forward is my question.
So I think there's a lot of gradients of gray between not telling a soul and publicizing the story. And I genuinely don't think that there's a one size fits all, right? Because well, let me backtrack for a second. Trauma has obviously a lot of parts, but two main parts of trauma is the actual event that happened, but a bigger part is actually what happened after that event. So if someone was met, let's say there was a traumatic incident like a car accident, right? Something benign, and then right away they were treated well, meaning police came right away. They went to the hospital, their family was there, they were supported, they got physical therapy, they went to regular therapy, they did EMDR. Chances are they're going to be okay. If their car flipped over in a ditch and they were stranded in a forest for hours and hours and hours and no one found them, and then no one really cared and they weren't getting right, that makes the actual event, even if the injury level is the exact same, that makes a huge difference. So it's the same with this kind of trauma also. There's the actual event of the abuse and then how it's met. So for some people, if they're gonna risk it all by telling everyone, that's obviously a pros and cons that they have to weigh, right? That's obviously on the extreme end. Is sometimes they can have a small group of people that they could say it to and heal. So let's say I know clients who've been able to share it with their husbands, with their best friends, with a mentor. It's also a very personal, private thing that happened to them. So they don't need or want it to be a public story. And sometimes there are other reasons also for not sharing it. But I do think taking it to the grave could be harmful, but you don't have to share it to everyone. Sharing it to a therapist alone and working through it like that, or again with a spouse, I think could be incredibly, incredibly healing.
I hear that, like having one person or a few people that you share with so that you're not holding it alone. How could it be harmful to keep it to yourself and not tell anyone?
So majority of the time that people keep it in is because of shame and shame festers.
Mm.
So if you keep it in, shame and secrets could just make you sick, and then you end up kind of could be in a little bit of denial, thinking that it's your fault, thinking that you're obviously I don't believe this, but people feel like they're disgusting, they're unworthy, all of these things, and that very often keeps it in, and that can be harmful in terms of their own mental health. And this is not to scare anyone, but more so it's just staggering statistics of it. That very often people who have experienced something like that, if they've never dealt with it in any capacity, very often the cycle perpetuates with their kids at the same age, unless they kind of do. And again, this is not a one size fits all, but it is kind of alarming to see the patterns that happen. So sometimes when people do come forward and they share it with their mother, the mother's like, "That it happened to me when I was your age," and the mother never spoke about it. And it was the same kind of thing where, the mother got pregnant at 13 and the child got pregnant at 13. Like things like that, I have seen over and over. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah. First of all, I have something to say. It's so interesting that you're saying about the same age, with your children. I went to EMDR therapy when my daughter, and I didn't even realize my daughter was about the same age when I was abused. And my therapist pointed it out, the EMDR
Wow.
therapist. And I was like, wow, That's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting. Back to the question, you were saying it can make you sick. Do you mean like mental health issues, addictions, substance use disorders? What do you mean?
So for sure that. So it could be make you sick just mental health wise. And then also somatically. I mean, when we have emotional pain that's really not dealt with, then it could for sure come out somatically. So sometimes people get fibromyalgia, they get autoimmune diseases, alopecia, which I know is an autoimmune disease, but different things like that. Also, just from keeping things in. And again, I don't think it's one or the other. You don't have to publicize it to the newspapers and go on the radio talk shows. But in terms of just not acknowledging what happened and actually facing it in a healthy way with supportive people.
I love the point about somatically because, yeah, totally. I believe autoimmune diseases are usually caused by trauma, like a lot of stress, chronic stress. Is it harmful to never confront the abuser, confront your abuser? Or can someone just live a totally normal life without confronting the abuser? No harm.
I mean, I think it's a tricky question, and I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think some people need that as their way of taking back autonomy and control, and
Mm,
a way of kind of showing the person, well, it's really more showing themselves that this person doesn't have a hold on me anymore. But sometimes
right.
also not letting someone live rent free in your head does the same thing for some people, meaning if they actually work through the trauma in a healthy way, let's say with a therapist, and they really understood what happened and they really faced the impact of it and they did the work and they're able to live a life free from the shackles of the abuse, that is enough for some people.
Right. So everyone's different and everyone really has to do what works for them.
Yeah. And a therapist could help you come to that decision. Of if it's something that
Right.
someone's, I mean, some people also don't get the opportunity to. I mean, especially if they were, let's say, abused by someone that was much older than them, by the time they're able to really understand what happened, that person could have passed. Obviously, sometimes it is a stranger that it happens to and they don't know who they are. There could be other circumstances in which that opportunity isn't there. And there, of course, are so many ways to still heal from that.
Wow, so interesting. Now, because you're a sex therapist, I kind of want to hear about the sexual consequences of being sexually abused as a child.
Sure. I'll go into that, but I'm curious. I know you're interviewing me, but I am curious your thoughts. Do you feel that it's important that everyone should confront their abuser if given the opportunity to?
I think that it is very powerful. I think, like you said, it provides an opportunity to give back what is the abusers, that what you're holding. I know that it's a hard thing to do and not everyone chooses to do that. I'm kind of like in between. Like I know it could be such a powerful thing to do, but I also know that not everyone wants to do that. And that comes first, obviously.
Yeah. But we're essentially saying the same thing, that it could be powerful, but it's not the only
Yeah.
way to heal at all. So there's first just general, sometimes mental health distress. So sometimes someone could come in because they have anxiety. But when you kind of dig deeper, especially because I specialize in trauma, I always come from a trauma lens and kind of do exploring and seeing. The different things that come up are sometimes extreme behaviors. So extreme, I mean a few things by that. One is, let's say, both ends of the spectrum. So something like avoiding sex, avoiding any sexual pleasure, any even intimacy. And I don't mean sex and intimacy is the same thing, but kind of can't get close to people, can't let people in. So physically, emotionally, things like that. And sometimes on the flip side, you could have just compulsive sexual behavior where it just never feels enough and it's kind of trying to fill a void. And people are constantly seeking different sexual stimulation, maybe at an excess rate or where it doesn't align with their values or different things like that. There also could be extreme behaviors in terms of sometimes people seeking out, let's say, extreme BDSM behaviors. So that can also be something that I see as a result. Not always. So I do want to make it clear that not everyone that is interested in more extreme sexual behaviors has experienced trauma. but it very often does happen. A lot of fear and anxiety around sex is common. A lot of shame around their body, around sex, around pleasure is also very common. Sometimes dissociative, so people will dissociate during sex. A lot of sexual dysfunction. So people sometimes will come in being like, "Oh, I can't orgasm," but a lot of times it's just they won't let themselves. They won't go there because they're kind of dissociating, or they're thinking that it's shameful or it's bad or something like that. Honestly, there's a whole host of things, and it can manifest in so many different ways, but those are kind of just the top things that come to mind.
Yeah, it's so interesting that it can manifest in so many ways, but it makes sense because the brain is so creative and every person's unique. And so it just goes to one method that it thinks it's keeping, the person safe.
Yeah. I read this thing. It goes,
So interesting.
your brain is not there to keep you happy, it's there to keep you safe. So it's gonna do whatever it thinks it is to protect you. Sometimes it goes to extreme measures, and what's protecting you ends up harming you, but it doesn't know that, so it's just gonna try it and continue. But, yeah, it is really interesting.
It's so interesting.
And it makes sense also when you look at it from a protective lens, when you understand kind of what happened, and not just what happened, but again, how the child dealt with it afterwards and how they made sense of it or didn't make sense of it, or right? I mean, there's so many different reasons that it would manifest differently.
All right. Would you say, I don't know if you see this, but sexually dangerous behaviors?
Yeah, so that would I would put as part of the extreme sexual behaviors that I sometimes see. So it can look like having a lot of unprotected sex with strangers. And so that's kind of risky behavior, especially it could happen in, let's say, young women, where they could also just be at risk for getting raped, getting drugged, getting STDs, STIs, things like that. So yeah, it definitely is a potential possibility.
Yeah, I'm thinking about something else. Do you see where the survivor kind of tries to recreate, I don't know, being raped or being abused, like non-consensual, or could get into more non-consensual sexual activity?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that really. There's sometimes the extreme behavior that's actually dangerous and very risky. And sometimes that could be from a feeling of just low self worth. And sometimes it could be that, especially if it their sexual template started with something that was also painful or dangerous, then there's also that association with pleasure and risk, or pleasure and something wrong, right? So sometimes they can kind of try and recreate that just because that's almost the only way they know how to. So sometimes there's that. And sometimes there's a way it's also of punishing yourself. So it really depends. It could, and sometimes it's a combination of all, but sometimes there's consensual risky behavior. And I wouldn't even call it risky, but consensual extreme behavior. Let's just say someone engages in, like I was saying, a lot of BDSM. They go to different dungeons and they welcome the pain, but it's consensual and there's a safe word. And that could a lot of times be a way to take back that autonomy and re-experience something, but with consent. And then sometimes people will role play. So sometimes people will role play rape scenes, even though they don't actually want to be raped in real life. But that gives them kind of that power to put themselves in a position of quote unquote danger and see that they are safe. And then again, a mixture of all the different things.
Fascinating. Would you say that people that were sexually abused as children are more prone to being sexually abused as an adult?
I would say the statistics are higher if, and they, first of all, none of these things are across the board. Every single person in every single situation is different. And it a lot depends again how it was dealt. Was it dealt with, the person's personality, other factors? The right. I just want to put that out there. It's really not a black or white thing. But I would say one of the, I guess, side effects or repercussions sometimes is people feeling like they can't say no. So oftentimes that pattern could recreate itself.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they don't know how, they've never learned it, they don't think they're allowed to. So sometimes it's even with like a safe and loving partner that they never ever say no because they just think they can't, they freeze. It's not an option for them. And that's just how it was. And sometimes, again, they put themselves in positions where it is risky and they'll just go along with it.
Wow. That is so unfortunate.
Yeah, another part to it also, again, is that sometimes the way people were able to be safe was by fawning/people pleasing. It's kind of one of the responses of the 4 Fs, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. And again, sometimes when there's sexual encounters, people go right back into that survival of fawn. So very often the partner, whoever they're having sex with, quite literally will not know that the person is fawning because it seems like they're interested, they're saying all the right things, that this person is going into a complete adrenaline response. This is how I keep safe. Just make the other person happy, let them get what they want, and then it'll be over and done with. So that's also another thing that comes up.
Wow, it's so complex.
Yeah. I mean, human sexuality in the best of times is complex. Add in trauma and add in religion, add in shame, add in societal expectations, add in like everything. And you just get a really, really complex situation.
Wow. So, with that being said, how does one heal from such a complex issue?
So the first thing I'd say is healing is 100% possible. I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes. And it for sure takes a lot of work. I mean, you're essentially asking someone to go back into a really painful, challenging time of their life. And there are different modalities in different ways. So I'm trained in EMDR, so very often we'll do EMDR. And that's quite healing for a lot of people. For some people, it's actually too intense because it's very confronting. You're kind
It's
of
very
going
confront. Yeah.
back there. It's a
Yeah.
yeah, it can be a very intense
Yeah.
modality.
Mhm.
So you have to kind of use precaution when doing that, but some people appreciate it and want it and like to just kind of dive in. And for some people, it's a little bit longer work and kind of going a little slower, which there's no right or wrong way. It's just, again, everyone's different. But how is healing possible? Because our brains are wired to heal. We have the capacity to heal 100%. And healing happens in exactly the opposite way that the trauma occurred. So with something like sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, there was very often confusion. You were disempowered, you were shamed, you were scared, all of those things. Healing happens the exact opposite when you're able to share the story and be believed and not feel shame as a result. You're still treated the same way with respect. You have empathy. You're met with someone who gives you what you didn't have at that time and you're able to be empowered. You're able to take back that ownership. You're able to have some clarity around what actually happened because not only is it terrifying for kids, very often kids don't even know anything about sex or pleasure or their bodies. And that's an entire other topic, also. So sometimes having a little bit of perspective just in terms of, wait, this is what happened. This was not my fault. This wasn't okay. This is why my body responded this way. This is why I acted that way, right? Sometimes people don't realize that, oh, my eating disorder, my teenagehood, that's why, right? And now they're in their 30s. Like sometimes it's as clear as that. And also very often then having a safe and loving partner who's patient, understanding, who makes sure you're comfortable and you're safe and you have consent and you're able to just take ownership back of it is incredibly healing also. And again, all of those things, just really doing the work, confronting, working through the pain, feeling the pain, grieving the loss of innocence, grieving all the different things. And honestly, this might be controversial, but sometimes even grieving the relationship you had with that person. Sometimes you really loved that person and that they were good to you in other aspects of your life. And that in and of itself can be extremely confusing. So really just working through all the different things, just confronting your own reality and building your own resilience is so healing and so freeing.
I mean, it sounds hopeful. It sounds like hard work,
Yeah.
but there are ways to do it.
100%. Another big thing also is groups, because there's something so nice and healing about seeing you're not alone and having support from others. Because again, shame festers in dark, secret places. And when you're in a group of people that are actually really normal and cool and regular, and you're like, oh, okay, it's not just me. And they also just innately understand, even though every story is different and every situation is different, there is a level of kinship and camaraderie and just understanding that people who've had similar experiences can offer that are different than those who haven't.
Totally. There's a deep shared understanding that only other people who've been in that situation, abused as a child, sexually abused as a child, can know in their guts, know in their bodies. It's not just like a knowing, it's a full body knowing.
Yeah, 100%.
What is sex therapy? Like, I know, okay, and I know what EMDR is. What is sex therapy?
So, sex therapy is an additional training. It's a quite intense, kind of like takes usually a few years to get the certification and do all the courses and the training on top of regular therapy. So, you first have to be a regular therapist, and then it's a specific training that it covers just human sexuality in general. So, a lot of anatomy, physiology, hormones, kind of just a basic biology kind of things, and then also the emotional components of sex because it's such a big part of people's lives, and very often they do need a space to talk about it, but doctors don't have the time to sit there to talk to you very often about these things, and also don't have the mental health training to deal with
Right.
kind of the combination of both. So, sex therapy essentially takes the knowledge of human sexuality and the knowledge of human psychology and combines them. So, really, anything that people are struggling with, very often, most people are in relationships. For me, I don't always see people as a couple. Sometimes I'll just see one partner in the relationship, but really any kind of struggle within their sexual life. So, it could be they're experiencing a mismatch in desire. Maybe one partner wants sex more often and one doesn't. Maybe there's boredom in the bedroom and they're just kind of haven't had sex in a while because they're both just like, eh. Or sometimes it's deeper than that. Sometimes there's actually something going on in the relationship. Sometimes there's a lot of anxiety around sex or shame around sex, or people can't orgasm, or there's painful sex, or premature ejaculation, or people wanting very different kinds of sex. Some people really want vanilla sex, and one partner wants something much kinkier and much more dynamic. Very often, especially I see this a lot in the more religious community, a lot of people are questioning their sexuality but are stuck in straight relationships or are being pushed to date the opposite gender and they don't know what to do. That's a big one that comes up.
That makes me feel so sad.
It's really hard. It's a heartbreaking.
Like, what do you do?
I mean, that's a whole topic in and of itself. Ultimately, it's their choice
Right. It's
what
That's a
they
whole
do.
different topic.
Just a lot of processing, a lot of making choices, accepting, deciding where and but it's a very hard
Wow.
position for people to be in. I really have a lot of empathy for that,
Wow.
especially again in the more religious world where they might lose it all should they decide to come out. Like, it's not an easy decision.
Wow.
A big one is shame. That's a huge one, almost across the board of just shame with what they like, what they don't like, what they look like, what they feel like, tapping into the pleasure. I mean, just the fact that they're a sexual human being, like everything. And again, a lot of these are people who have not even experienced any sexual trauma, but just the messaging they receive, purity culture and religion and society and media. And I mean, the list goes on and on.
Right. We're just inundated basically with all this messaging around sex that really goes into our psyche and really affects us.
100%. And it's also not really
Wow.
talked about. So you have all these questions, feelings, concerns, thoughts, everything. And then you're kind of just mulling it over in your head and you're like, am I normal? And the most interesting thing for me as a sex therapist is I hear people's most innermost thoughts, right? And feelings. And everyone thinks that they're the anomaly and they're the crazy one. And I'm just like, if you only knew someone who looks like you in your community, like I could tell you, let's say a huge one that I see often. So I do see more women than men. Men I'll usually see within a couple or not sex therapy. For sex therapy, I pretty much, if it's going to be just an individual, I'll see women. So many religious women masturbate. I promise you. Everyone thinks they're the only one. Everyone thinks that they're the only ones that discovered their bodies and they're just like shrouded with shame.
Wow.
And they cannot believe that they ever one time or 10 times or whatever it is did that.
What?
And I'm like, I can guarantee you most have at some point or do frequently or any range in between.
That's so interesting. So Tell me a little bit more about sex therapy. What do? You talk about it? Is it more like CBT, like challenging the thoughts? Like what is it?
So it depends on what they're coming for. A lot of times it's just kind of education. A lot of people, again, a large part of my clientele, I would say, are brides that come in that have either recently just learned about sex or they kind of knew, but not really. And there's a lot of anxiety and fear around it. And then very often, once we kind of just go through again, basic anatomy, physiology, what to expect, and then a lot of anxiety techniques and relaxation, and also just how to tap into pleasure and reducing shame, things like that, that are, I don't want to say basic, but kind of baseline. But obviously, of course, things can build.
That's fantastic though. Like whoever told these brides they should go to a sex therapist, amazing.
Yeah. But it's sad that they need to, because some of it is just the most basic sex education. And I mean, things from didn't know
Yeah.
that there's something called an erection, to didn't know what semen was, to didn't know about their own lubrication, to never knew there was something called an orgasm for men, for women. I mean, we're talking about basic things. Didn't know where their vagina was.
Wow. Would you say that having sex education can be part of preventing child sex abuse?
Without a doubt. I think we actually spoke about this, but obviously I'll share for the podcast. But I wrote a thesis for my master's on the correlation between sex education and sex abuse. And the research that I did showed that there is a correlation between communities that don't talk about anything sex, body, puberty, safety, just really anything in that arena is shut down, that there is a higher rate of sex abuse in those communities, and that there's a correlation between kids who feel that they could talk about it, because some kids know that if you mention anything about that body part, you'll be yelled at. So why would they go to their parent who has never given them a safe space for that? Right. And they also don't know themselves what is happening. Versus if it's talked about, they could be like, wait, someone was acting a little inappropriate. And I remember we had a conversation about it. Now, is it foolproof? No. But does it reduce? Without a doubt. 100%.
Right. And I think it's like a part of it. Like I think there's holistically there's a few things or a lot of things we could do to prevent child sex abuse. I think this is one piece.
Yeah, for sure. I like the word holistic with this, that there's so many different parts to preventing it. And this is a huge
Yeah.
piece that
Yeah.
honestly is empowering, because as a parent, as an educator, as a human, you can do. There is something within your control that you know that you can do to help prevent it.
Right. You were saying about we're talking about sex therapy.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I only went to
We weren't
one.
finished.
Yeah, I only studied about the psychoeducation or the sex education. So that's a huge part, and sometimes that alone, I've had brides tell me like, "Oh my god, okay, I feel so much better now. I didn't know any of this. Okay, I could do" right? So sometimes that alone is really helpful, and again, it depends what they're coming for. If they're coming for, let's say, painful sex, I would work in tandem with either a pelvic floor therapist or a gynecologist, depending on just what their needs are, because if those are actually is a medical issue, but even so, once the medical issue is resolved, sometimes just the thought and the anticipation of pain could get in the way. So sometimes using some somatic exercises or CBT and kind of getting into there could be helpful. Again, if someone's coming in with a lot of trauma, then I would do a lot of trauma work, which really just goes back into the past of what the trauma was, whether it's through EMDR, some psychodynamic, some IFS. It really depends. I kind of tailor it per client. I have a general approach of how I do it, but some clients, let's say, for example, I mean, I'm just going to use EMDR. Some love it and some are like, no. And I would never force it upon anyone because it is quite confronting. So, yeah, really just different ways. And it kind of just depends on what they're coming in for.
Right. That's so
And
interesting.
another thing also is very often you have to look at the relationship. So sometimes someone will come in and be like, oh, I have no interest in sex. I have no libido. Their hormones are fine. They're a regular, healthy young woman. Like, why would a healthy young woman not be interested in sex ever, right? Maybe they have a lower libido. And again, if they're not breastfeeding, they're not pregnant, there's no external medical reason. And then we start talking, and her and her husband have been fighting for the past year, and they can't stand each other. And right, and you're like, okay, well, obviously you don't want to have sex with him.
Right.
So sometimes it's also just more relational.
Right. Like our bodies know they don't want to have sex with someone you've been fighting with for a year.
Yeah, it's not exactly sexy for most people. Some actually do like it, and that's a different story. But I think for the most part, you're like, no, why would I want that?
Right. Fascinating. So it really sounds like sex therapy is multifaceted. It's not one approach, and it really depends on the client, on the situation, like on what tools you'd bring in and what you'd use to help client.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a concept in therapy called attunement, which essentially just means that being attuned, which I know you can't use the definition for the word, but kind of recognizing what that person needs, essentially. So that would also vary. And again, if someone really needs time, we'll take things much, much slower. And some people need to have that space to talk more. Some people are just like, I just want solutions. Like, where's the aversion coming from? Where's the shame coming from? All of those kinds of things. And I would say, just again, that's my theoretical approach. And it hasn't proved me wrong yet.
That's amazing. It sounds so hopeful, really. I hope if there's a message that people get from this is that you can heal.
100% healing is so possible.
And maybe that whatever you're experiencing is normal.
I would agree with that.
Wow, I had a question. Is there like something that you know of that's a real hindrance in healing from child sex abuse? Or like something that really blocks it, that you cannot heal if this?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is you can't heal something you're not willing to admit that is how that happened or that's harming you. So that's the main thing I would think of. And obviously, the other thing is if the harm is continuing. You can't heal from trauma that's ongoing.
Right. You can't heal while you're still in the place that's keeping you sick.
Right. So there are incidences, unfortunately. And again, I know people are going to be like, there's no way. I promise you these things are real. Of people who have, let's say, been abused by their parent. And as adults, the abuse is still ongoing. Or they're bringing their kids there and their kids are being abused. So it's, in some ways, they're perpetuating it
Mm,
and enabling the same, and seeing what's happened to you and your kid is also just part of that whole cycle. So I would say in those cases, now again, everyone is different. For some people, having a relationship with the person is too much. For some people, they actually could, and they could just have strong boundaries.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
If someone's, let's say, really not functioning or has very low emotional regulation and they're dysregulated all the time, and you can kind of slowly work on just emotional regulation, or you can slowly work on building a support system, or slowly work on gaining autonomy, or slowly work on talking about childhood, even if people have dissociative states, right? So there's so many stages to healing that I wouldn't say like, oh, you can't heal. Like, I don't think I've ever said that or seen that. But just research wise, if someone's not willing to, then no.
Right. Or if they're still being abused.
Yeah, that you can't heal from the same. It's kind of like getting a burn and then going back to the place, and it's just gonna keep
Yeah,
getting burnt.
that makes sense. Do you have a message to parents that you want to share?
Yes, protect your kids.
Hmm.
I mean, I know that's quite simple. Obviously, I'll go into detail with it. Protect your kids. So often it's happening under their nose and under their roof. Don't be naive. Protect your kids. Teach them. I don't care how uncomfortable it is. It is uncomfortable. It's awkward when your 3-year-old is running around saying, "My penis," or whatever. Like, yeah, it's awkward. But teach them. That's your job as a parent, to protect your kids. Empower them to be able to be a safe space so that they could come to you if something happens. It's not a one-time conversation. Have continuous conversations, and be discerning of who you let around your kids. Don't leave your kids alone with, really, I guess, anyone. I mean, it's hard to know because, again, sometimes it is people you trust. And I'm not saying you have to be, like, worried about
Neurotic.
every single person around, but don't be naive. And there are certain things that are safety measures in terms of like sleepovers, in terms of babysitters, have nanny cams in the house, have rules about sleepovers. Again, continuously talk with your kids, continuously learn, listen to them, watch your kids. Sometimes these things
Yeah.
happen when both parents are just sleeping Shabbos afternoon. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories that that's a prime time is during Chagim or Shabbosim, and there's a lot of just unsupervised time. So those are kind of the main things I would say.
Yeah.
And just try your best. You don't have to be neurotic. It is your job to protect them.
Yeah, it really is. I like what you're saying about don't be naive. Someone was telling me, a mother of young children, that she had a guest over on Shabbos, a single man, I think, and he was cuddling with one of her children on the couch, and she thought it was just cute, like he was just, and it could be it was, okay? I don't know this guy at all. It could be it was, but that's naive. That educate yourself. Don't allow that to happen under your nose.
100%. Yeah. And also don't let things escalate because sometimes that's how it starts, right? There's just such a normalcy in touching. Most people don't go to the victim and just touch them right away and molest them or rape them. That's almost never how it happens. Obviously, yeah, sometimes people are dragged off the street and raped, but that's not usually. Very often there's a grooming process and there's a normalcy process, there's a trust process, and all of these things are for that reason, to gain access and to make it normal so the suspicions are lowered. Don't be naive. It can happen to you, it can happen to your kid, it could be anyone. Most people don't walk around with a sign that says like, "Hey, I molest kids." And I think everyone has this idea of what child molesters look like. I promise you, they look like your neighbor, they look like your friend, they look like the people you know in the grocery store and shul, down the block, teacher. I mean, they look like regular people.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember the podcast? He's a comedian in Crown Heights. I forget his name. He did a podcast interviewing a child sex abuser. Do you remember?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, this was a while ago, right?
Yeah, maybe like 2 years ago. And what was so interesting to me was that everyone was saying this is terrible. We can't give him this kind of floor. Like, we shouldn't give him the space to talk. And my opinion was that this is amazing. People need to see what a child sex abuser looks like. They look like anybody. They don't have horns. He was wearing a white shirt, black pants. He looked like a yeshiva guy. Like, we should know. We should get familiar with what abusers look like.
I agree. I actually remember that controversy, and I had a similar thought process. Not just that, but
Mm,
why not hear from them what they look for, what the signs are? I mean, I've seen a lot of interviews of people who either were released from prison or something like that, and they talk about who they generally target, what makes things easier, what makes things harder for them, how to keep things people safe. And again, I think that silence is not helpful to anyone. Again, not that we should be platforming people of like, "Yeah, let's hear what turns you on." No. But much more of if it's productive. And I think
yeah, and
that
we could learn so much.
yeah, 100%. And again, I think that reason in and of itself is important,
Yeah, I agree.
that it's not always that creepy person. Sometimes this person you had no clue.
Right. Exactly.
So another thing I would add to message to parents, there was a story that I saw online about a parent who she just had a hunch that something was going on with her daughter. And she asked her a few times if she was being, I don't remember the exact words that she used, something like if she was being touched or if there was something she wanted to say. And her daughter kept denying it, but she just knew something was wrong. And then she finally said something like, "Is there a secret that you're not allowed to share with me?" And that kind of cut it. And her daughter eventually shared that I don't know if it was her dad or her stepdad was abusing her. And sometimes your hunch is right. Obviously, sometimes not. As I'm saying, I don't need people to be paranoid and think of everything as a huge thing. But sometimes finding the right words, especially for kids who really don't have the vocabulary and kind of just getting on their that level is also really helpful just to make sure that they're safe.
Right. I think it's what's important to note also is that the red flags were probably waving. And that's probably what the mother saw. It wasn't probably like a small thing. There was probably like real red flags that something was wrong.
Yeah, that's where her hunch came from, she was saying. Usually just a drastic behavior change in a child, like, your children,
Yeah.
is definitely a cause for concern. It doesn't always mean this, but it's always just something to look into, a wise or huge drastic change. So either a child who's normally very well behaved, happy-go-lucky, becoming very just inward and not talking and kind of sulking and isolating is a huge thing, or on the flip side, so all of a sudden throwing tantrums, having outbursts. So any kind of extreme behavior that's normally not in line with a personality is definitely worth looking into and inquiring.
Yeah. I interviewed someone for another episode, a survivor, and it's wild. I think this is gonna come out after, so it's okay for me to say. There were so many red flags waving around. I'm not gonna go into what they were, but they actually took him to a specialist and they thought he had testicular cancer. And when they realized it's not testicular cancer, they just let it go.
That's insane.
So I'm saying the red flags be waving, okay? You don't have to think if your child I really don't want people to come away from this terrified and neurotic and paranoid because it is scary. It is scary. But I want people to know the red flags and to know that they're going to see them most of the time if you pay attention.
100%. I mean, it is scary, and I don't like the fear-mongering,
Right.
but maybe that's not my point either. It's much more of an empowering thing. There are things you could do. See the red
Yeah.
flags, deal with it, because kinda like I was saying earlier with trauma, it's actually, they say, kinda more impactful, not just what happened, but how it's dealt with. So even if, God forbid, something did happen, and sometimes you could do the best and have the conversations, protect your kids, right? Sometimes something can happen in school. You're not there, right? You're kind of trusting the school to do the best job, or God forbid something, a stranger on the street. Like, there are things that happen that are out of your control, but how you deal with it afterwards, night or day. That to me is I would say, actually really within your control. And
Mm,
know your kids, know the signs, look into it, talk to them, see the red flags, figure it out, keep them safe, try, right? All of those things.
yeah. So are you saying that even if a child was sexually abused, you as a parent or caregiver can actually make them heal or make it easier for them to heal or make it not as bad for them by how you respond?
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
Definitely.
So I think that's also very empowering for parents to know.
Yeah. And the quicker it's dealt with, the better the healing, or the more chance or whatever. So if a kid, that's what I'm saying, if you have a good relationship with kids and they know that they could come to you with secrets or quote unquote bad things or scary things, whatever it is, and you bring them into therapy right away and you tell them how proud you are of them telling you, and you believe them and you listen to them.
And you cut the abuser off.
Yes. Well, that's should be a given. Stop, right? As we're
Yeah.
saying, you cannot heal if you're continuing to be abused. So that would be the bare minimum. But all of that, oh my god, 100%. People are resilient.
Right.
That's
That's so empowering.
a baseline thing I have as a therapist. People are resilient, people can heal, for sure.
Wow. Amazing. I want to hear if you have any resources to recommend to survivors that they might find helpful in their healing.
Yeah. So everyone connects to something else in terms of what helps them heal. So some people like reading and just getting information and listening to podcasts. So there are a few books that I could recommend that a lot of people like. Some I've read, some I've not, but I just kind of compiled a list because I thought it was helpful. So one of them is called The Courage to Heal. That's a really good one. Healing the Shame That Binds You. That just talks a lot about shame in general. The Body Keeps the Score is a very common one that everyone knows, but still a good one. It Wasn't Your Fault is a good one. Waking the Tiger. And
Peter Levine, is that Peter
yeah,
Levine?
Peter Levine. And the other one is Allies in Healing. Those are kind of the top ones that are recommended. And then there's a bunch of organizations. So there's general kind of world or American organizations. So there's one called RAIN, which stands for Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. And they have just trauma support, resources, reporting guidance, a lot of different things. I think they also have a hotline that you could call. There's something called 1in6.org, and that's focused more on males, so a specific resource for male survivors. And there's free online support groups and chats, and that's a helpful resource. There's something called Darkness to Light. I think it's d2l.org.
Yeah.
And then so they have the 12-step groups. So there's something called
Right.
Survivors of Incest Anonymous. So that's also just like a support group, 12-step style for survivors.
Specific to incest.
Yeah. Then there are Jewish specific groups, and some people feel more comfortable with that because it just feels more familiar or safe or more understanding of the culture and the nuances that come with the experience. So there's Zaka, which is a big one. There's a Mudim. There's something called Sacred Spaces. Truth is, I'm not familiar with that one, but I was just doing research and I saw that one. There's also something called JCASA, which is Jewish Community Against Sexual Abuse. And it's advocacy, community empowerment, and it's run by different survivors. And there's also something called survivorsforjustice.org. And this is also an Orthodox Jewish survivor advocacy group, and they have legal help. They tried doing reform efforts and raising awareness. So those are kind of ways of finding resources just that people can reach out to. But in general, therapy would highly recommend. And group support
Yeah.
also. So there's a lot of free, especially if someone can't afford private therapy or something like that. A lot of these websites have group options. I would definitely recommend those resources also.
Wow. I love how comprehensive your list is. I'm going to include it in the description
Mhm.
of this episode.
Another kind of positive spin on all this is that I really do see that the Jewish community is opening its eyes and people are really not living under rocks anymore. Of course, there are people that are. But as a whole, as a community, I see there's much more awareness, a much more of a willingness to learn, a willingness to talk about it, a willingness to help victims. So I do see the tides changing, which is really nice.
It is. Yachet, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
I think this is going to be so enlightening for people. And is there a way that people could reach you if they would like to?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. It was really nice doing this with you. And I'm so happy you're doing this podcast. It's so informative and needed. People could reach out to
Thank you.
me. They can email me, Jackie. I go by Jackie at work because most people can't say Yachet. Jackie at yjmcounseling.com. Or they could reach out to you and you could give my information.
Thank you, Yachet. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Loved having this discussion with you.
Yes,
Thank
it was really
you.
nice.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Silent No More. If today's conversation moved you, taught you something new, or gave you a moment to reflect, I hope you'll share it with someone else. Together, we could create a world that listens to survivors, protects children, and breaks the silence around abuse. If you or someone you know is a survivor and needs support, you're not alone. You could find the resources we discussed in this episode's description. To stay connected, follow along on Instagram at Better Safe Than Silent, and be sure to follow so you don't miss future episodes. Until next time, stay informed, stay compassionate, and never be afraid to speak up.